Hey y'all, I hope you're well. We're going to continue today with our series on miracles, looking at some of the miracles that Jesus did in the Gospels. We're going to be today in Matthew 14. Last week, Charles talked about the miracle of the man being healed near the pool of Bethesda. And today we're going to talk about Jesus feeding the 5,000. So we'll start off in verse 13 in Matthew chapter 14. It says, "Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick." We're going to pause right there. So the first line says, "Now when Jesus heard this," the this that he's referring to is actually about the death of his cousin, John the Baptist. Jesus, before he was even born, met John the Baptist. They met each other in the womb, and John the Baptist leaped for joy, knowing that Jesus was the Messiah. And from that point forward, John had a ministry where he literally prepared the way for Jesus. And Jesus has just heard at this point that John was executed by Herod. And so it says here that because he heard this, he withdrew to a desolate place. Unfortunately, Jesus is very popular at this moment, and he can't really get alone. And so despite the fact that he wants rest, he wants to be by himself, the crowds come to him. But what's amazing is Jesus' response to all this. He has compassion on the crowds. He's not driven by his own situation. He's not driven by his own needs, but he is still able to hear the Father and have the Father's heart in the midst of this. So he actually begins to heal them. And so he's had this whole day of ministry of healing the sick and tending to people, even while he has fresh emotional wounds as well. So we pick back up in in verse 15. It says, "Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, 'This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves.'" The disciples are ready for this whole thing to be over. They too seem really tired and really just want everything to be dismissed. They just want time alone with Jesus, like what was originally planned. But let's see Jesus' response. Verse 16. "But Jesus said, 'They need not go away. You give them something to eat.' They said to him, 'We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish.' And he said, 'Bring them here to me.' Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children." Wow. So when the disciples come to Jesus, they have this sort of excuse for why the crowds need to be dismissed. They say, "It's a desolate place. They don't have anything to eat. Let them go so they can go find a place to lodge and a place for dinner." And Jesus says, "Actually, the plan is for you to give them something to eat." And I don't know if you've ever faced a situation or are facing a situation where essentially you feel like the will of God is something that is far beyond your own possibilities. It's far beyond your own willpower. It's far beyond your own resources or time. Maybe God is asking you to serve someone in a certain way, in a way that feels more than you can handle, or do something that feels like it's more than you can handle. And that's exactly how the disciples are feeling in this moment. They're thinking, "Jesus, what are you talking about? We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and you're telling us to feed this entire crowd?" And it says it's at least 5,000 men, right? So plus women and children. So probably, a very conservative estimate would be more than 10,000 people. They're thinking, "What? This is crazy." But all he has them do is bring what they have to him. And I think that that's such an amazing lesson for us. All Jesus is asking us to do is bring the little bit that we have to him. So maybe you only have a little bit of time, or you only have a little bit of money to give away. Maybe you only have a little bit of patience in a certain moment. But whatever it is, we bring it to him. Maybe you only have a few words for someone, a few words of consolation or a few words of testimony. but we bring what we have to God. And as we do, watch and see what happens. So Jesus takes the loaves, he takes the fish, and he blesses them, looks up to heaven, blesses them, then he breaks them, and he gives them back to the disciples. So for us, it's incredible. It's not only the fact that Jesus begins to take what we have, and he begins to multiply it. He literally begins to stretch out what was not even a meal big enough really for the disciples themselves. He begins to stretch it out for thousands and thousands of people. He does this, but he also allows the disciples to be the distributors of this. Notice that Jesus is not the one who's distributing the bread and the fish to every single person in this crowd, but he actually takes the food from the disciples, then he blesses it, multiplies it, and hands it right back to them. And they're the ones who are meant to go to all these little groups of people and to hand out their dinner and to hand out their food, the things that they need. And this is exactly how Jesus works today. He wants to take the little that we have. We go to him in prayer. We go to him just by offering it to him during the day. And as we give it to him, it's amazing. He takes what we have, he multiplies it, and he continues to use us in the process. I remember when I was in college, I had a few good friends, and we were all really close to this woman named Miss Deborah. And she was a lady who worked in the cafeteria that we had at university. And Miss Deborah was amazing. I mean, she was Christian, and she just clearly loved God and loved people. She would say hello to everyone. She knew everyone's name. I mean, it's literally thousands of students coming in to this cafeteria every day. And so one day, one of us learned that Miss Deborah had a big need. She needed a car because her car had broken down, and she lived pretty far away. And so it would be, thousands of dollars to repair her car. Now, we were college students, and we didn't have a lot of money, but we had an idea. And the idea was that we could create a GoFundMe for Miss Deborah and just see what happened. And so we created this GoFundMe, and we wanted to raise money, not just for her, but for her to, get her car repaired, but actually to get a new car. And so we set the goal for $12,000, and we started the GoFundMe, and literally within, I think we all gave maybe like $20 each or something. And literally within 48 hours, we had the $12,000. There were so many people who were so excited to give to Miss Deborah, and so excited just to be part of blessing her. It was incredible. I mean, it was something where we literally couldn't believe it. We were watching as the hours went by and as the money kept rising and rising, we were like, where is this all coming from? People were just giving $5, but again, it was thousands of people who knew her and wanted to give, or maybe not thousands, but definitely hundreds. And so that was an amazing moment of learning that we didn't have to provide the whole $12,000. We just needed to do what God was asking us to do. We took the little that we had a little bit of time to create a GoFundMe, we had a little bit of money to give to it, and then we just launched it and let it go and saw what happened. And of course, she was so blessed by just the whole, not just the money in the car, but by the act of love that it really showed. And so for you today, just want to encourage you that the little things that you do, when you feel like Jesus is saying, bring me this, even if you feel like, what impact will that make? What difference will it make? It might make all the impact in the world for someone. So just want to encourage you, take the little you have, bring it to Jesus, and watch as he multiplies it, puts it back in your hands, and lets you minister to others. Bless you today. Hope you have a great day, and look forward to seeing you soon.